Own your own Ontario. Mrs. Scace put the finishing touches to her salad, turned the soup to simmer, and pushing open the kitchen door, reached for an iron rod that hung on a nail. Swinging the rod lightly, she banged a great round disc of metal that was suspended by 2 wires from the veranda eaves. The clatter was enormous, loud enough to be heard by her children, wherever they might have wandered. It also drowned out the noise of the family car, driving gently up the road and stopping by the garage. Albert Scace unfolded his long legs from the front seat and followed them with his long, solemn face and more red hair than either Brian or Linda could boast, or so it seemed on his big head. "Geez, Thelma, you'd think the kids were horrified now between Warkworth and Percy Boom, the racket that thing makes. Bird, if they were only in the barn and I fired a cannon, they sometimes wouldn't notice." A shrieking noise from over the road announced as the 2 girls came running up the hill. "Now you wish we were as deaf as they are when you had to call them. Bert, the girls are noisy, but they're here. It'll take more whacks at the gong to bring your gender to lunch." And Thelma aimed more blows at the gong. The little girls had by now reached the house, and were both scrambling all over their daddy, who tried to grab them for a hug between putting his fingers to his ears and making faces at the gang. Then all 3 danced off into the house, fingers in ears and trying to outdo each other and making faces. Even Thelma was beginning to be stunned by the noise she made when Kevin appeared over the side of the hill. He was careful not to come up by the way of the road allowance and had been scratched by thorns as he made his way around to appear almost directly up the bluff. "Kevin, what have you been up to?" "Slipped down the bluff, Mum. Fell into the thorns. Like a bad seed." "What do you mean, Mum?" "Never mind. Go clean yourself and put something on these cuts." "Where's Brian?" asked Kevin. "Playing near the barn, I think." He went indoors, followed by his mother. Thelma could usually rely on Brian to come as soon as he heard the lunch bell. But today Brian came puffing up the hill at the last moment, having heard the bell when he was still talking to George Wiseman. He hastily washed at the kitchen sink and sank into his chair just as the meal was beginning. "Something big going on in the barn?" asked the mother. "I wasn't in the barn. I was down at the sand hills." Kevin stopped in mid-mouth, wondering if Brian had been nearby when he did his manly, daring deed at the Play Village. "What was going on down there?" asked his father. "I saw Mr. Wiseman drive his tractor there, and I went to see." "And listen, I expect," said Thomas. "He was picking up sand for Russell's sandbox." Linda and Debbie had tried to be quiet and pretend that nothing unusual had happened that morning, but now they began to giggle. "What's so funny about Russell's sandbox?" asked Albert. "That's not what they're excited about," said Thelma. "They were bothering Kevin all morning." "Those brats couldn't bug me if they tried," said Kevin. Thelma nearly spat up her soup. "That's not the tune you were playing earlier." "Never mind, Mum. I'm too big for them anyway." "I hope so." Thelma looked at her husband. "How are things going in the great County Conservation Authority today?" "Well, we have some good places. Plans coming for a pond and mini marina out of Hartford. I've been working on them." "What use would a marina be on Hartford Pond? Even tiny sailboats needn't go there." "Well, need somewhere to go. The idea would be to clear the marshes through to Rice Lake, like the old Percy Portage. That'd take a packet of money. And keep bread on our table, too. Of course, it's politics. The member needs a lot of votes up around Hartford. He's going to get in again." Linda spoke up. "Daddy, who is the member?" "Sam Hagerman, Pudding." "What's he member of?" "Member of the Legislature of Ontario." "Oh, provincial parliament, if you want it to sound grand," said his mother. which with exuberant is most all the time. At this point, the sound of a car coming up the drive was heard through the open windows. "Wonder who that is," said Albert, getting up to go to the door. The family looked up inquiringly as their father greeted a fat man who had emerged from his long green car and climbed the porch steps. He was wearing smart city clothes, dark green, and the girls began giggling again when they noticed the little bright green feather in his equally dark green hat. "Linda, he's a bird," said Teddy. "Queer bird, if you ask me," said Kevin. "Come on in, won't you?" said Albert. "The family is just halfway through lunch." The children could tell by his voice that he was not pleased about interrupting his own lunch, but the visitor seemed unaware of this. "Please don't get up, anyone," he said. No one had any intention of getting up. "What I have to say should be of interest to all the family. My name is Edward Bondworthy, and I believe you may be Mr. Albert Scace. Yes, and here is Mrs. Scace, and these are my children. Please sit down. Don't mind if I get on with my lunch. I have to go back to work. Farm work is never done, I know. I don't work on a farm. But you have a good-looking piece of acreage here, Mr. Scace. Some good, some not so good, but not enough for a man to support his family. My father could, but not me. A good many people have found they have too much land they can't use, and that's why I'm here to see you." "Oh, what do you mean?" The children could see that their father's initial impatience was being replaced by curiosity. "Mr. Scace, I represent a new movement of people designed to give everyone a patriotic sense of belonging to Canada." "Mummy, what is patriotic?" interrupted Linda. Mr. Bondworthy beamed at Linda and was about to explain when Thelma looked him straight in the eye and said, "Patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel." "Oh, Mrs. Scace, there's that's terrible." Bondworthy controlled himself and set his face in order again, saying to Albert, "Mrs. Scace has quite a sense of humor." It was Kevin's turn to interrupt. "Got any grapes today, Mum?" "No, I'm not buying grapes while we have to import them from California. The grape workers there are on strike because they don't get paid enough for their labor, and now we're helping to keep them poor by not buying grapes." Brian thought aloud. "But how does that help?" "No," said Albert impatiently. "If anyone would just give us a chance, we'd hear what Mr. Bondworthy wants to tell us." Bondworthy was getting rather uneasy, giving side glances towards Thelma. The children noticed this, and were quietly enjoying the discomfort of the kind of man who doesn't expect a woman to have any idea or anything to say. He ventured, "I represent Own Your Own Ontario. Surely you must have heard of it." "Ah," said Thelma, "something to do with buying back Canadian resources from Americans." "No, Mrs. Scace," Mr. Bondworthy was plainly shaken. "In fact, our company could not have started without capital from New York." The resemblance between Thelma and Kevin could not have been clearer at this point. Their eyebrows lifted, their upper lips curled. Brian and Linda looked down cheerfully, while Debbie played with cake crumbs on her plate. "So this is a company," said Albert. "I thought you said it was a popular movement." "Yes, it is increasingly popular. We have many inquiries at the sign of the Triple O. But this summer we are running buses for the city of whole families, and there are swings for the kiddies and pop for everyone." "Tough tooth rot," said Kevin. "What's it all in aid of?" "Everyone who joins the Triple O family can own his own piece of land and enjoy the beauty of the inheritance." "Is it a club?" "It's a good name for it. We like to think of it as a family, a happy family of people sharing the privilege of living among the rolling hills of Ontario." "Well, Mr. Bondworthy, this is very interesting, but where do I come in?" "A number of your neighbors, Mr. Scace, have allowed us opinions on options on their land, and we've already taken options on 2 farms near you." "What are options?" Brian asked. Thelma interjected. "Are those your machines down by Warkworth scraping the topsoil away?" "Yes, indeed, Mrs. Scace. We are leveling mountains and filling in valleys, just like the prophets in the Bible." She looked him in the eye. Unless I miss my guess, the prophets you are not after have nothing to do with religion. Well, really, that's unfair. Never mind, Mr. Scace. Own Your Own Ontario would like to buy an option on your surplus and unused acreage. Would you now? The children hung on their father's words. His red hair seemed to bristle with static. Yes, and I have some attractive agreements for you to sign. Bondworthy reached down to the briefcase. Never mind the papers, Mr. Bondworthy. Albert rose from his chair. I'm not doing any business of that kind with you. But, Mr. Scace, and now if you'll excuse me, I think we'd better go. I have to get back to work, and I want a word with my wife before I leave. You'll regret this, Mr. Scace. I don't see why I should. I already own my own Ontario, and you seem to think it's a good idea. Albert ushered the salesman out the door, and the children crowded behind to hear every word. Mr. Scace, I happen to know where you work, and I could put in a good word with the Conservation Authority. I thought you thought I farmed the land. Albert had opened the car door for Bondworthy. Well, I looked you up before I came. Did you? I'd look very long and hard before I'd let you set foot on my land again. Bondworthy flushed angrily. That's insulting. I have to know that I could put in a bad word with the authority just as easily as a good one. See, you're holding up progress. You try it and see what happens. But if you came round nosing around my property again, I'll bury you 10 feet deep in manure. He slammed the car door on Bondworthy, who already had the motor going. I'd report you for issuing threats, Scace, he shouted as he drove out. Which is where you belong, shouted Albert after him. No, too good for him, said Thelma, grinning from the doorstep. End of chapter 3.